From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
While farmers try to grow crops,
it's a tough time right now, and Russia's just hammering civilian targets.
the battle for Ukraine rages on. The latest as one farmer philanthropist fights to save lives and fields. Grains start the week with a rally spurred on by new numbers.
We needed it to be strong to get a good number today, and we got it.
We'll have the latest grain stocks report as farmers in the Southeast begin to take stock of what's left.
It's just really horrifying.
The incredible damage left behind from Hurricane Helene, right now on AgDay.
AgDay is brought to you by Pioneer.
Ben's bins, please hold.
Yeah, Ben's has been busy all day.
Seems like no one can keep up with this News East series. What did you all put in these feeds?
Science.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. It's being called an unprecedented disaster. We're talking about the massive amount of damage caused by Hurricane Helene, which hit Florida's Big Bend area late Thursday night before traveling to other southeastern states, leaving destruction in its wake, not just of human lives and property, but livestock and crops. Now, we begin our coverage with Laura Geary and the latest on efforts to find the missing and reach isolated communities.
It's just really horrifying. It's sad because there's still people there that are really hard to get to.
Several communities in western North Carolina remain virtually isolated Monday, cut off from life-sustaining supplies and medical care, days after Hurricane Helene decimated large parts of the Southeast.
There is no commercial or retail water available in our city.
The mayor of Weaverville finding a small window of cell phone service Monday morning. His town, like those nearby, in desperate need of things like water, food, fuel, and communications.
6,000 people have responded to a website we have where you can request to be hooked up with your missing family.
Many of the missing may be found when wireless service is restored, but a grim reality remains.
We've heard accounts of people seeing houses floating down the river with people in them. So we know that death toll will rise.
Hundreds of roads remain closed Monday with damage on a scale that could take years to repair. Historic and beloved towns, lakes, national parks, forever changed.
This is a demarcation line. It will be completely different going forward.
A message from President Joe Biden Monday. Help is coming.
I've directed my team to provide every available resource as fast as possible to your communities.
But for many storm victims right now, survival is hour by hour.
We don't know where we go from here. We don't know where everybody else goes from here.
In Charlotte, North Carolina, I'm Laura Aguirre reporting for AgDay.
And the scope of the damage to farms and ranches in the Southeast is just coming to light. In Georgia, the state's Cotton Commission saying affected producers are reporting yield losses ranging from 35% to a total loss. It says without question the losses will be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, Georgia is ranked second for cotton production in the U.S. The Georgia Farm Bureau is also hearing about damage to pecan trees, poultry houses, and flattened row crops. For pecans, the University of Georgia is estimating larger trees suffered about a 70% loss and younger trees saw about a 40% loss. Georgia peanut farmers worked ahead of the storm to harvest what they could, but in one county there was major damage to a peanut elevator and storage bin. You just saw all of the problems in western North Carolina due to road closures and communication being out. The North Carolina Farm Bureau sharing these pictures showing roads damaged and crops underwater. Now, one extension official reporting widespread damage to agriculture in that region, while in eastern Tennessee, it's much the same story with pictures shared of flooding and fields underwater. Now, in some parts of the country, summer heat seems to be sticking around. Meteorologist Matt Engelbrecht joins us with more.
Yeah, obviously the big focus has been on recovery into North Carolina, western North Carolina and other locations from that tropical system. But then you zoom out and you move back over here towards the west and you're seeing a ridge of high pressure, something that we talked about last week, developing and anchoring over nearly 2/3 of the United States. So between the 5th and the 9th, they're anticipating above normal temperatures. And right underneath here, I'm not expecting much in the way of significant precipitation. We're right around average back into parts of North Carolina, Tennessee, as well as West Virginia. Overall, the pattern is pretty quiet when we talk about precipitation, severe weather, flooding potential, which should help with recovery efforts. We are monitoring something deep in the Gulf of Mexico. That's going to be the southern part of the Gulf of Mexico in terms of the tropics. So we'll have more on that coming up in a little bit. Otherwise, temperature outlook through the 9th continues to have that warmth, that heat in and across the United States. And congratulations are in order in Saskatchewan, Canada. Andrea Desroux. She wrapped up harvest last week, but she kept one last pass for a surprise over the weekend. Looks like a baby girl is on the way for her and her guy there. Congrats to you both.
We're also following another important story, the release of USDA's quarterly grain stocks report. The agency reporting old crop corn stocks as of September 1st totaled 1.76 billion bushels. That's up 29% from last year. 780 million bushels of that are stored on farms, also up 29% from a year ago. Off-farm stocks totaling 980 million bushels, up 30%. For old crop soybeans, it's a similar story. 342 million bushels stored, up 29% from September 1st of last year, with 111 million bushels on farms. That's up 54%. Off-farm stocks coming in at 231 million bushels, up 20%. Wheat at just under 2 billion bushels, up 12%. On-farm at 664 million bushels, up 11%. Off-farm up 13% at 1.32 billion. Analysts call the corn stock number friendly.
What I'll probably suggest is we definitely fed a lot. The disappearance in the fourth quarter was strong. We needed it to be strong to get a good number today, and we got it. The other wild card was maybe would they find some extra bushels from last year's crop? That kind of surprised us. At this point, we did not get it. So I guess you could argue the government had a pretty good handle on the ending stock numbers at the moment.
We also received the small grain summary with all wheat production totaling 1.97 billion bushels. That's up 9% from last year with an average yield of 51.2 bushels per acre. That's up 2.5 bushels from a year ago. AgDay's Michelle Rook will have much more reaction to these reports coming up in Markets Now. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky returning home following a whirlwind visit to the U.S. Now, last week, he visited the United Nations, meeting with President Biden and both campaigns. He also toured an ammunitions plant in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Now, those munitions remain critical for his country, as we heard from Howard G. Buffett during his whistle-stop tour to Denver in September. As the fighting continues in Ukraine, soldiers are also taking the war to Russia.
Ukraine has done this kind of amazing incursion into Russia and Kursk, which kind of demonstrates that they haven't lost their will and that they are very capable of fighting for themselves.
It's a message Howard G. Buffett shared with a number of audiences in and around Denver, Colorado this September, including the governor as part of his Whistle Stops for Ukraine tour in partnership with the German Marshall Fund.
It's a tough time right now, and Russia's just hammering civilian targets.
New reports show Russia continues to fund its war at the cost of Ukrainian farmers. The Wall Street Journal reporting that Moscow and its allies have sold nearly $1 billion worth of stolen Ukrainian crops. That's on top of seizing farmland and coercing local farmers.
Russia continues to farm it. They force Ukrainian farmers in the occupied areas to farm it. They're forcing farmers in the occupied area to turn over their land, assign their land over to Russian businesses and Russian farm organizations.
Buffett has made more than a dozen trips to the war zone, where his foundation at the end of this year will have spent some $800 million replacing agricultural equipment, helping with planting, harvesting, feeding people, and working on a way to demine the roughly 25% of the country suspected of being covered in explosives.
All that ground that the Russians were on is probably really heavily mined. And people are still trying to harvest their crop that they planted the year before.
Buffett explains his foundation has been testing, building, and setting off explosives in order to find out what works safely.
We have to understand what survives, what does it cost to fix something after it's been damaged. How do we get to where you take Ukraine talking about 100 years to demine, down to 10 years. How do you do that? Well, you have to do that at scale, you have to do it with technology, innovation.
Some of that innovation coming from Colorado-based PTx Trimble and others through autonomy and GPS guidance systems. Company leaders at PTx Trimble demonstrating some of the latest equipment and answering questions from Buffett based on his time working in Ukraine.
What was really interesting for me was some of the depth that we went into on the agriculture space. You know, things talking about how do we keep machines operating within boundaries? How do we make sure that we can have the ability to monitor and control them in remote ways, especially on the support side? And also his fascination for how can autonomy help to serve some of the initiatives that he is working on within his foundations.
As Buffett shares his experiences from the front lines.
We set the guidance line, we hit go, and that thing's going to go through the field 100% on its own.
His focus is finding a way to demine faster.
I'm going to go blow equipment up, because if I can get thousands of hectares done and I can amortize a $350,000 machine over 5,000 hectares, it's less than what they put in that field for seed and fertilizer in 1 year. The mindset has to change.
He's confident in the tools being deployed, but waiting for the fighting to end.
They are going to solve this problem, but they don't get to solve it until they win the war.
Now, Buffett told me that at the current pace of demining, it would be like needing to cover an area the size of Colorado on a riding lawnmower. He's hoping it can be done much faster. Well, up next, the market reaction to Monday's USDA report. And later, the World Dairy Expo is underway in Madison, Wisconsin. Corn and wheat futures getting a lift following USDA's grain stocks report. Michelle Rook has a closer look at what these numbers mean going forward in markets now.
Grains ending mixed on Monday after the reports, with corn and wheat to the plus side, soybeans lower. Chip Nellinger is joining us. And Chip, let's talk first of all about corn. 1.76 billion bushels quarterly stocks. That was actually a little friendly. How friendly was it, and why could we not close above 425 on beef?
Yeah, definitely friendly, Michelle. I mean, that was down, almost 90 million bushels below the average estimate. At face value, very friendly, showed increasing usage. But I think at the end of the day, it was more technical and money flow. Last trading day of the month and quarter, I think we saw a lot of fun buying, especially in corn, from the funds who are coming out of what has been a pretty large position. After today, they should be under 100,000 contracts net short. And so at the end of the day, I think we got up into some target levels there at, 425, 427. December achieved some targets to the upside, saw some increasing farmer selling. And so at the end of the day, I think it was more about money flow and fun buying than it was about this stocks report.
And soybeans, neutral report, but we set back because we do have some rains and some rain chances for Brazil. Was that part of it?
I think that was a large part of it. Not much there really for the bulls or the bears on the stocks report. About in line with expectations. Maybe a little better chance of rains than what Brazil has faced really for the last month or so. That's a week out, so that could change 10 times between now and next week. But right now, the way it looks, they have their best chance of meaningful rainfall in some of those dry areas of northern Brazil than they have for many, many weeks. That's now next week, midweek next week. And so the market's going to hang on that very closely. If they start receiving better rains, then they're going to really advance their planting pace very quickly. If it doesn't rain or they take rain out of the forecast, could be explosive to bean prices. So it's full-fledged weather market in the case of beans.
And not much in the reports for the wheat market to fodder on. And so we did end higher. Was that just some short covering because it was end of the quarter?
Yeah, I saw some further confirmation over the weekend of 12, 14-year low production in European wheat. That might be an excuse. At the end of the day, I think it was a lot like the corn market. Funds coming out of some shorts here at the end of the quarter.
Thanks so much, Chip Nellinger, Blue Reef Agro Marketing. We'll have more AgDay coming up.
As I mentioned earlier, overall a quiet pattern is setting up across the United States. So we got the jet stream and it's going to respond. We got a ridge of high pressure, so the jet stream is going to push more up here to the north. That's where the warmth comes in, and the lack of rainfall and cloud cover follow. Again, this is Tuesday at 7 a.m. Still looking at isolated showers. So there's a shallow trough that's digging on the outskirts of this little bit bigger trough up here to the north. Anticipating a cool front, cold front to move through Tuesday and into Wednesday. So again, that's going to kind of shake things in terms of some showers, perhaps an isolated thunderstorm, but the severe weather threat, the flooding threat overall remains low, but we don't need any more rain in those areas, both Tuesday or even on Wednesday. So by Wednesday afternoon, that trough's going to work off into the Atlantic, and we're going to set up that pattern that we were talking about last week, which is going to be a ridge of high pressure off here to the west, and then also trying to develop back over to the Midwest as well. A little bit of a tropical feature back down here to the south. This is mainly moisture. We're not expecting anything to really develop out of that, but our eye is going to be on the tropics and anything tropical in nature, especially with what we just went through. But the hurricane season, unfortunately, isn't over yet. So by the time we get into Saturday and Sunday, start to see a trough develop off the east coast, and that's where we get some rain back up here to the north and northeast. Not a lot of changes anticipated back here towards Dallas, Oklahoma, or even into parts of Missouri. It's not until you get back up here to the north that we see another trough or another cold front trying to sweep through. Rain chances overall by Saturday at 4 p.m. stay low, but it is worth monitoring as we get into next Sunday and Monday. We'll start off with Utah. Sunny, high around 81 degrees, low of about 53 degrees. Alto, Arizona, mostly sunny, high of 96, low of 64. Ashley, North Dakota, partly cloudy, high of 68.
USDA is making new funds available to help out organic dairy producers. The funding totaling $58 million. That money comes from the Organic Dairy Marketing Assistance Program. USDA says it's to help expand the market for organic dairy as well as increase consumption. Farm Service Agency Administrator Zach Ducheneau says the program is designed to keep the market for organic dairy sustainable as they weather challenges outside of their control. Specifically, the program provides for an increase in the payment rate to $1.68 per hundredweight compared to the previous $110 per hundredweight. Additionally, the production levels eligible for assistance has increased from 5 million to 9 million pounds. It's that time of year again, time for the World Dairy Expo. The Farm Journal team, especially dairyherd.com, gearing up for the big event. The 5-day expo showcases everything important for dairy cattle and the industry. It takes place in Madison, Wisconsin. Now, this year's theme is the Golden Age. There will be 8 dairy cattle shows along with dozens of educational sessions. Farm Journal's Tyne Morgan will be there to tape an episode of U.S. Farm Report for this weekend. So make sure, if you're at the event, to say hi to our Farm Journal team. Well, the cleanup following Hurricane Helene is likely to take years. We'll stop by a North Carolina apple farm next to survey the damage.
Register now for the Milk Business Conference, December 10th and 11th in Vegas, for a chance to win tickets to the National Finals Rodeo while in town.
The devastation we're seeing in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and Tennessee from Hurricane Helene is heartbreaking. The North Carolina Farm Bureau says homes, farms, and complete towns have been washed away. Linda Pryor, an apple producer in Henderson County, North Carolina, took us on a tour of some of the damage she's seen. And our thanks to the North Carolina Farm Bureau and Linda for sharing that video with us. Now, if you're wondering how you can help, experts say a financial contribution is the best way. That can include the American Red Cross, United Way, Salvation Army, CARE, and AmeriCares. We have information about those agencies and others on the AgDay Facebook page. And that's all the time we have this morning. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a safe day out in Farm Country.